guys, first and foremost, welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, welcome to my channel. If you like anything that's mysterious or creepy, then you're definitely in the right place, and hit that subscribe button. So, first, I want to apologize for any traffic sounds or anything like that. Our windows are open because it's very nice outside. Also, if you guys watched my last video, when I said that I had a cold, still have it. Turns out that cold is COVID. So, takes a little while for the symptoms to completely go away. I'm on day 7. I'm fine. I don't really have that many pre-existing health conditions, thankfully. So, I had asthma really bad growing up, but a horrible immune system growing up. But my immune system has gotten a lot better. So, thankfully, it's not too bad. I am fully vaccinated, and the hardest part for me, minus lack of energy, has been a stinging pressure in my sinus passageways. But besides that, I'm fine. Should be over soon. But I spent so long yesterday, you guys, trying to gather all of my information into one thing so that I could film this video for you guys. So I would be really shocked to come across somebody who didn't know who Marilyn Monroe was. Now, honestly, before really diving into this, I knew there were conspiracy theories regarding her death. I knew little bits and pieces, but I didn't know a crazy amount about Marilyn Monroe. I knew who she was. She's absolutely beautiful, and she's an icon, right? She's an icon. There's that whole thing with Kim Kardashian and her dress, and that was a whole another thing. And it's incredible that she has remained an icon so long after her death. So, Marilyn Monroe was born on June 1st, 1926 in Los Angeles, California. Her real name wasn't actually Marilyn Monroe though, but instead it was Norma Jean Mortensen, and she was later baptized as Norma Jean Baker. Unfortunately, she was one of those children who spent a lot of time in foster care and orphanages. In 1937, Grace and Doc Goddard, who were family friends of Marilyn's mother, were paid $25 a week to raise Marilyn. She never knew her father, so obviously her father was nowhere in the picture. And personally, I'm sorry, but you shouldn't have a kid if you are paying somebody else to raise that kid. And second, if somebody was like, hey, I'll pay you X amount to watch my kid, I would just be like, how about I just adopt your kid? Friend or not, I'm sorry, but if I'm the one, that's my responsibility. I don't want money from you. I want that kid to have a better life. Anyways, the couple that was raising Marilyn, they were extremely religious and very strict, to the point where Marilyn wasn't allowed to go to something as simple and ordinary as the movies. I've met different families or different people who grew up in very religious and strict households, and some of the things that they weren't allowed to do that I view as ordinary, like watching certain things, like reading Harry Potter, playing Pokemon, with Pokemon cards and stuff like that. I've met people who they weren't allowed to do those. And to me, that's very mind-boggling, but I didn't grow up in a super religious household, so I can't really compare. But I think it's really ironic, considering she wasn't allowed to watch movies in the early stages of her life. But she became this icon in movies. At one point, Doc's job was transferred to the East Coast, and they couldn't afford to take Marilyn with her. So unfortunately, at the age of 7, she had to go back into foster care. She had to endure sexual assault on several occasions. And later, she had come forward saying that she had been raped when she was 11 years old. Now, unfortunately, the foster system, like, it's not known to be good, right? Like, this isn't an uncommon situation for people in those homes, it's just horrible. So Gladys, which was Marilyn's mother, would develop psychiatric problems. She probably had them beforehand because she didn't want to raise her daughter and stuff, but she was eventually placed in a mental institution. Marilyn then went on to drop out of high school at the age of 15, and in 1942, at the age of 16, she married her boyfriend, who was a merchant marine, who was named Jimmy Dougherty. Marriage was a chance at a better life for her than what she had previously endured. So she was really excited to start this better life. Now, later in life, though, Marilyn would remember this horrible memory of her mother. And this would actually be the first memory that she would have of her mother, like the earliest memory she has. And it was of her mother trying to smother her with a pillow. Now, postpartum is a huge thing. I could do a whole video on postpartum, but I'm curious if it was like pre-existing things or if it was postpartum depression that caused her mother to want to do this. But anyways, that's just horrible to remember something so brutal, especially from someone who's like almost created to love you. She also had a half sister, but they were not close at all. They met only a handful of times. Now, when Marilyn's husband went to the South Pacific for work, she had started working in a munitions factory in Van Nuys, California. And it was actually there that she was discovered by a photographer. And by the time that her husband would return home in 1946, she had a successful career as a model. That year was the same year that she signed her first movie contract. But it would take a few years for her to really get up and going because she wasn't the ideal image. Like, her body image and the way she looked, the way that she sounded wasn't the ideal image that a lot of directors and producers wanted for their movies. But all that would change. And within just a few years, Marilyn literally took over the world. And she would become one of Hollywood's most famous actresses. But as we all know, fame isn't as glorious as it may seem.
A distinction.
Well, what do you know about that?
Marilyn suffered from pre-performance anxiety, and this would often make her incredibly ill and was the root cause for her legendary tardiness on film sets. And it was to the point where her co-stars and cast members would become so frustrated and annoyed with her because they were all prepared and they were ready, and here she is delaying that, but it's something that she couldn't really control. Throughout her career, she would get signed and be released from several contracts with film studios.
Gives expensive jewels, a kiss on the hand, maybe.
And in the mid-1950s, she got tired of playing that dumb, bubbly blonde. So she moved to New York City to study acting with Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio. By the early 1960s, it seemed like her life started to hit quite the downfall. Not only was she having bad luck in relationships, but her last two films, Let's Make Love in 1960 and The Misfits in 1961, were box office disappointments. So, between her personal life and her work life, she fell into quite the depression. And in her final years, her severe depression and insomnia left her dependent on amphetamines to get out of bed in the morning and barbiturates and alcohol to get her back into bed, which that's not a life. Marilyn ended up being fired and sued for $750,000 by 20th Century Fox because of a horrible upper respiratory illness that she had that was delaying production of 1962's Something's Gotta Give. She was eventually rehired at the request of co-star Dean Martin, with the production set to resume in October, but unfortunately, as we all know, that didn't happen because Marilyn's life would come to a sudden halt. August 4th, 1962, Marilyn spent the day hanging around her Brentwood estate, where she had a therapy session and a meeting with a photographer to discuss a spread in Playboy magazine. Around 3:30 the next morning, on August 5th, 1962, Marilyn's housekeeper, Eunice Murray, found her lying in her bed and unresponsive. So now I'm outside because Sebastian is sleeping, and her first husband, Joe DiMaggio, she had renewed her contract with 20th Century Fox, and she had just bought a house within the last year of her life. She had never owned one before that. But that's not the only thing that makes people hesitate and take a second look at the cause of her death. And kind of go back to the drawing board thinking, maybe this is something bigger. For example, the police station was just down the road, but the police weren't called until 4:30 a.m. on August 5th. This was around 6 hours after her publicist was called to her home. A police officer by the name of Jack Clement arrived at the scene and was quoted as saying it was the most obviously staged death he had ever seen. Her body lay perfectly on its side, on the bed with pill bottles neatly arranged beside her. Her diaries were gone, and even stranger, bed linen had been washed. Now, why would a housekeeper take the time to wash the bed linen of somebody that was dead? Like, the linen that they were laying on. He felt as if her body had been arranged by somebody. He stated that he had been to suicides before when the victim had overdosed on barbiturates, that when this happens, the body always contorts in some type of pain before you actually lose consciousness. So after he had stated this, he was actually replaced and ordered to remain silent, which I think that's a pretty big red flag right there. The autopsy showed no evidence of tablet residue in her system, and there was a lot of bruising on her body. And tissue samples that were supposed to be used for analysis disappeared. So Marilyn was prescribed Nembutal, which is a barbiturate, which is in the sedative class, and it's most commonly used for treating short-term insomnia. And on August 4th, her psychiatrist asked Eunice Murray, which was Marilyn's housekeeper, to keep a close watch on her. She claimed to have last seen Marilyn alive at 8 p.m. that night. The autopsy report also included a statement from the psychiatric investigative team that was brought in to examine Marilyn's death. They said, quote, "Miss Monroe suffered from psychiatric disturbance for a long time. She experienced severe fears and frequent depressions. Mood changes were abrupt and unpredictable. Autopsy also points to a probable suicide because of some of the clues around her body, and also states that she had previously attempted suicide by ingesting sedatives. But in this instance, she called for help and was just saved in time, despite her prescription of Nebudol being refilled just a day before her death. The bottle was empty, and there was a large amount of sedatives found in her system. Another strange detail is that her door was locked, and that Peter Lawford claimed that Marilyn was slurring her words on the phone when he called her for the last time. However, people who spoke to Marilyn after him that day said that was not the case, that she sounded completely fine, which kind of backfires his statement a little bit, because if she sounded fine, it kind of seemed like he was trying to play up the, oh, well, she must have just forgotten that she took the medication and took more medication because she was drinking. Also, the claim that Robert Kennedy was nowhere near California that day was also a lie. He was seen pictured with his family in San Francisco, and then he got on a plane to LA, where he was seen by quite a few people. So if you have nothing to do with it, what is the point of lying, right? Something's just not right there. Now, even though there were reports of depression, some of Marilyn's friends say that she was in really high spirits and talked about traveling in the months leading up to her death. That she was very excited, like she had a lot going for her. So kind of and not saying that like people that have a lot going for them can't be depressed or can't, things just can't get too much for them, but it was kind of out of left field for them. Along with many other people who don't believe that Marilyn's death was a suicide, Joe DiMaggio also believed that she was murdered. In an interview with People, he said, "I always knew who killed her, but I didn't want to start a revolution in this country. She told me someone would do her in, but I kept my mouth shut." So let's dive into the theories. With that in mind, just know these are theories, not all facts. So some things are from other people's perspectives, some things are hearsay. These are things like I just have Google. I don't have special connections to these people. So this is just information that I could find with all the research that I did. So I'm just giving you everything that I could find. So nobody come after me, please. So they could be true or they could not be true. And it's kind of to your own discretion. Like, we might not ever know what actually happens. But I'm here to give you the whole shebang, so here it is. Most of, if not basically all of these theories surround the Kennedy brothers. The Kennedy brothers theory has a lot of smaller theories within it, and well, there's just a lot to unpack. It's no secret that Marilyn Monroe was linked to JFK and his brother Robert Kennedy. I mean, on May 19th, 1962, Marilyn made her now famous performance at John F. Kennedy's birthday celebration, singing "Happy Birthday, Mr. President." Moments later, the president went up on stage saying, "I can now retire from politics after having had happy birthday sung to me in such a sweet and wholesome way." Now, that's probably one of the most famous performances. It was a big moment. But this theory dives way deeper than just the song. Marilyn wasn't treated well by the Kennedy family. And I'm not knocking the Kennedy family. Like JFK, one of my favorite presidents. But she wasn't treated well by them. She had alleged affairs with both the brothers, which I also don't support affairs. So, but anyways, she was said to have first been in a relationship with JFK and then went on to Robert. None of this is fully proven, but it's a very popular belief that she had those affairs. It said that she wanted to be the first lady, and that Robert Kennedy had even said that he would leave his wife for her. But that changed a couple of weeks before she died. And she had become more of an inconvenience to the Kennedy family. She would send constant letters and call them numerous times. And these phone calls and these letters, they would all be ignored. Marilyn was mad because she was being brushed aside, and she threatened to make the relationship public. That's when 2 days before her death, she started receiving multiple phone calls from Robert Kennedy as well as another woman, ordering Marilyn to stay away from him. On the day of her death, it said that she had a huge fight with Robert Kennedy in her home. Joe DiMaggio believed that the Kennedys were responsible for Marilyn's murder up until the day he died. He was very convinced. And he claims that he had read Marilyn's diaries after her death, where she was said to have written that Robert Kennedy had told her of the CIA's plans to murder Fidel Castro with the help of the gangster Sam Giancana. She is said to also have told Frank Sinatra this, who ended up informing Giancana. So, I mean, this could have backfired to her and went with the theory of, like, a hit got put out on her because of that. Anyways, James Hall was an ambulance driver and was the first to arrive at Marilyn's home at the time of her death. I said that Marilyn's psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, arrived at the same time, and that Robert Kennedy actually convinced Dr. Greenson to inject Marilyn with a lethal injection of Nembutal. So Nembutal in high doses can cause respiratory arrest. Marilyn had begun to come around, and Dr. Greenson pushed up her left breast and injected the drug. So this version would account for the lack of tablet residue that was found in her system. It is said that Marilyn used private detectives to bug her home in order to keep records of her meetings with the president and others. On the day of her death, an argument was picked up between Marilyn and Robert Kennedy. It is said that he stopped by Marilyn's house at 10 p.m. on August 4th, and that he left the door unlocked so that the killers could come in after him. In this theory, it's believed that Marilyn was knocked out using chloroform and then moved to her guest cottage, where she was stripped and given an enema of barbiturates. Another theory linking directly to the Kennedys is that Robert Kennedy was worried about secrets that he shared with Marilyn during pillow talk, and that he ordered the CIA to kill her. She claimed that the day she died, she was thinking of telling everything about the Kennedys and all of their secrets, and that the Kennedys called in their mob connections to shut her up. Administering chloral hydrate by enema was a well-known mafia way of killing, and would also explain the bruising and also the lack of tablet residue. There's also the communist theory that the FBI believed Marilyn was a communist because of her marriage to Arthur Miller. Had also publicly questioned the use of atomic bombs in America, and was believed to have applied for a visa to visit the USSR. In 2007, Philip Moore brought the Kennedy brothers back into the spotlight by reporting on a declassified file that was newly released under the Freedom of Information Act. This showed a plot that involved everyone from Attorney General to the housekeeper. The 1964 heavily censored document stated that Monroe had overdosed herself in an attempt to gain sympathy and attention. The Kennedys then used her supposed suicide attempts which were not really an attempt to kill herself, to cover up murder. They were worried that Marilyn was going to come public with their affairs. JFK's brother-in-law, Peter Lawford, is said to have gotten her psychiatrist to prescribe 60 pills, which the housekeeper deliberately left by her bed. The housekeeper was hired by the psychiatrist, Dr. Greenson. After she took the tablets, she called Greenson, and he simply told her to go out and get some fresh air. So at this time, she would have just believed that she would just have to have her stomach pumped and she would be fine. However, that didn't happen. And instead, she would be left to die. He then turned up only after knowing that she had passed. And then Robert Kennedy called Peter Lawford to find out if she was dead. Another theory is that in 1962, Jimmy Hoffa was at odds with the U.S. government over allegations that he was using a pension fund to make payments to the mob. Hoffa was not happy with the allegation, not because it wasn't true, but because he believes that the Kennedy family made their money in bootlegging. And Robert Kennedy was the lead in the investigation against Hoffa. Hoffa was angered by the hypocrisy, and it's theorized that Hoffa went after Marilyn because he believed that Robert Kennedy was actually the one in love with her, not vice versa. So it was in an act of revenge that he had her killed. Then there is the theory that the CIA killed her to get back at the Kennedy family for the Bay of Pigs invasion disaster. Another theory claims that she was murdered on the orders of Chicago Mafia boss Sam Giancana in order to make Robert Kennedy back off on his crusade against the mob. So all of this leads to the most interesting theory, that she was going to expose the truth behind UFOs. Now, honestly, this is the theory that I believe the least, only because JFK at one point, I could be wrong, but I don't think I am, wanted to expose aliens and UFOs and all that to us. So, like, why would they have her murdered if he wanted to do the same thing? It doesn't make sense. Anyway, according to Dr. Stephen Briere, who's very renowned in the UFO community, Robert Kennedy had been so paranoid about his affair getting out into the open that he wiretapped Marilyn's phone, partially to keep an eye on the affair and partially to make sure that she wouldn't divulge any secrets. Dr. Briere claims that he has acquired a summary of the wiretapped conversations, as well as a highly classified document called Project Moon Dust, which he claims had been given to him by an important member of the National Security Agency. This document is said to outline how JFK had brought Marilyn to a secret base for the purpose of inspecting things from outer space, which would most likely be aliens, possibly the same ones from the famous Roswell crash in 1947. Dr. Briere says that the document names important high-ranking officials, and it all gets interesting when Marilyn gets very mad when both of the Kennedys broke up with her. According to the transcripts of the wiretapped conversations, Monroe was very agitated and threatened to convene a press conference in which she would tell the secrets she knew, including what she had seen at that secret airbase. According to Dr. Briere, this was enough to get the CIA involved, and it seems like they kind of took things into their own hands. He said that they have a number of smoking gun documents, including a wiretap of Marilyn Monroe before she died, which has never been declassified. She was threatening to hold a press conference to tell the world what she had learned during pillow talk with the Kennedys, and about having seen debris from an extraterrestrial vehicle at what the document calls a secret airbase. So it's important to note that there is no evidence of Dr. Briere actually having these documents. So I'm not saying that he's lying, because he could have them. I don't know. He could have them. But he has never come forward with the actual documents. He's only said he has them, but he's never shown them. So there's really no proof that we have that he is 100% telling the truth, only because what's the point of bringing all this up if you're not going to back it with the evidence that you say you have? But that's just my opinion. So Marilyn Monroe was buried in her favorite Emilio Pucci dress in what was known as the Cadillac casket, the most high-end casket available. It was made of heavy gauge solid bronze and lined with champagne-colored silk. Strasberg delivered a eulogy before a small group of friends and family, and she is buried at the Westwood Village Memorial Cemetery in Los Angeles, California. She didn't own a house, as I previously mentioned, until the year that she died, unfortunately. And surprisingly, she didn't have that many possessions. But one of her most prized possessions was an autographed photo of Albert Einstein, which included an inscription to Marilyn with respect and love and thanks. And I think that speaks volumes about her, that was one of her most prized possessions. So what do you guys think happened? Do you think it was an affair gone wrong? Do you think that somebody tried to get back at the Kennedys and Marilyn was just collateral damage? Because with the mob and mafia and, all those things, it's not uncommon for them to go after loved ones. And the Kennedys are a very powerful family. So, and especially JFK was the president. His brother was Attorney General. So it wouldn't be unheard of for powerful people to, kind of get rid of people that could possibly ruin their lifestyle. Or do you think she was really just going to expose aliens to the world and they couldn't let that happen? What do you think it was? I can't tell you exactly what I think it was, but I don't think that it was a suicide. I don't think that she did this at her own hands. And the truth, we might not ever really know what happened to Marilyn Monroe. If there's a specific case that you guys want me to cover, definitely also drop that in the comments down below. Like this video, hit that subscribe button, and until next time, I love you guys. Bye.